Thanks very much for having me. Let's go through this so that we can actually get you in time for a little cocktail. I'm sure you could all use one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this idea of content marketing, and it's funny. This is such a perfect segue into what I was going to talk about, this idea of trust and where we are with the idea of content and creating experiences and talking about this idea of trust and where we sit with the consumer today. How many of you are from larger organizations? Siloed, matrix, global, sort of sitting in your own silo and sort of wondering what the hell marketing's supposed to be doing? Okay, good. How many of you are for smaller organizations, SMBs? Okay, anybody from nonprofits, NGOs, that sort of thing? Yay, great, I'm glad you're here. What we talk about when we talk about engagement of consumers and we use the idea of content marketing, and so many of you I know are thinking about this idea, if not already practicing it. And so this idea of where we're thinking about content is an important thing. And so just to kick things off, what I want to do is I want to take you to a time and the idea of this idea of trust, and I want you to think of a time in history where technology was really becoming democratized, where we were seeing the disruption of technology in all kinds of industries, new gadgets, new technologies really disrupting every industry, but perhaps the media industry and the marketing industry most pronounced. And in time when mass media was becoming tribal, when we started to see mass media, the news, become much more around religion, politics, business, tribal in nature, and more niche in nature, where it was really targeted to small, focused audiences. And at the same time, when there was a new idea of marketing, a new idea of how we were going to engage consumers where they were. And I want you to think of this time, and it may sound a little familiar, it may sound a little like today, but of course what I'm talking about is the middle of the 19th century. And the middle of the 19th century, by the way, is just a fascinating time to study if you're into the idea of where media was, where marketing was, and where we are in terms of trust as consumers. So in the mid-18th or 19th century, rather, 1830-ish, this is what a newspaper looked like. This is, of course, the New York Commercial Advertiser, the front page of the New York Commercial Advertiser. And what's the one thing that's ironically missing from the front page of the New York Commercial Advertiser? Anybody? What? Did somebody say image? Or say it loud. Thank you. Ads, advertising. All right. So yes, advertising is missing from the New York Commercial Advertiser. This is one article from the New York Commercial Advertiser. I've had the displeasure of actually reading this entire article. And here's the thing, the New York Commercial Advertiser, when you would get this, you had to be pretty rich. It was a pretty considered purchase. You subscribed to it. There was no advertising, so you had to pay for it by subscribing to the newspaper in those days, and you would get it weekly, and it would cost today's equivalent of around $300 or $400 per year to subscribe to a newspaper. But the thing is, you're not getting sports scores, you're not getting crime, you're not getting the weather, you're not getting business. You're getting basically this one article on the front page of the New York Commercial Advertiser, and I can tell you because I have had the displeasure of reading it, it's basically an analysis of the political restoration in France of that time. Yay! This is what you get for your $300 per year. It's a wonderful, wonderful article about this. And so it was an industry begging to be disrupted, and it did. It got disrupted. A wonderful guy by the name of Benjamin Day disrupted the newspaper industry. This is his first issue of what became the most popular newspaper of its day, the New York Sun, shortened to the Sun, ultimately. This was issue number 1 in January of 1833. And I love, the first thing you notice is that there is an ad. This is the only image, of course, I can find of this, but there is an ad right down there. You can see it's broken up a little better. You can also see the price, 1 penny. They called these the penny papers because they were supported by this newfangled thing called advertising. And what would happen is that he put his mission statement right there on the front cover. This is obviously way too small for you to see, so I've blown it up here so you can actually see it. And what Benjamin Day said is that this object of this paper is to lay before them everybody all the news of the day at a price that's affordable for everybody. And then my favorite part of this whole thing is when he tags it by saying, this sheet's going to be enlarged as soon as the sale of advertisements require it. Meaning, as soon as we sell more ads, we'll just start making up more news. Does that sound a little familiar these days? Yeah, and they did, of course, they did. They started to make up the news. They went out and interviewed all of these wonderful astronomers who told us about life on the moon and what life on the moon was like. And this is an illustration from that article that ran in 1833. And these bipedal beavers, that is the one and only time that bipedal beavers were mentioned in this conference, and I dare say I would wager a bet that it's the only time it will ever be mentioned again. And the bipedal beavers were fighting with the bat people, and the bat people and the bipedal beavers were fighting over the natural flora and fauna of the moon, which included deer and water and all sorts of wonderful things. And they were having a big fight on the moon. It was a war with all these bipedal beavers and the bat people. And we Americans, we went, yeah, okay, I buy that. That's cool. I got it. I'm in. I'm totally in. They never printed a retraction. They never had to. We bought it, hook, line, and sinker. It was the introduction, if you might call, fake news. And we were in. We trusted it. It was absolutely trusted. Why? Because the newspaper said it was so. The newspaper said it was true, so of course we bought it. And I love what we talked about here, because this, as I mentioned, the previous presentation was a perfect introduction to this idea. This is where we are today, this idea of trust. Where we are in talking about trust. Because here we think about classic marketing and advertising. Classic marketing, and by the way, before I go through this, I'm just going to tell you, I'm a huge fan. I'm classically trained in marketing and advertising, absolutely loving it. It is different than content marketing. When we think about content marketing, it is different. And this is the one thing that I want you to take away from this whole thing, is that it's different. Because when we think about that classic funnel, we think about what? We think first about broadcast audiences. Where are we going to put a message out in front of a bunch of people, and hopefully they'll do something in our favor? They'll visit our store, they'll come into our restaurant, they'll actually visit our website, they'll put stuff in their shopping cart, and what do? We put this demand generation process in front of them, and we try and create demand to the point where they become leads. You might call them SQLs or MQLs, or you might call them qualified leads, or you might call them visitors to your website. Whatever it happens to be, they become visitors, and then all of a sudden we lead nurture them. We nurture them through a process. If you're a B2B organization, you might nurture them through a long process, through sales guys, this wonderful process, the big lead nurturing process through direct mail and drip and those sorts of things. If you're in e-commerce, you might hit them with email if they put stuff in their shopping cart and then abandon it. If you're a nonprofit, you might hit them with email if they visited the website and you want them to donate. Whatever it is, you nurture that lead till ultimately they become a customer. And then ultimately you put messages in front of them until they become upsold, cross-sold, all of the loyal advocates. That's our classic funnel writ large. This is what we do for a living, is to build this idea of the classic-based funnel. Content marketing is different. It's not going away, the funnel. It's just different. It's a different kind of model. Because when we measure the funnel, we have to measure it via cost. It's the only way to measure it. When we think about marketing, and classically the way that we measure marketing, it's always built around how efficient can we make this funnel. Cost per customer, cost per opportunity, cost per lead, cost per visitor, cost per thousand. The more we can make it more efficient and push more people through the funnel, the better we are. I love the fact that we call it lead nurturing, but our main goal is to shove them through the pipeline as fast as we possibly can. This is what we do. Content marketing is different. Content marketing builds value in a different way. We do start with, of course, broadcast or what I like to call anticipated audiences, the audiences we want to reach and do something with. And when we reach those audiences, the first thing we want to do is engage them, an engaged audience. Now, I know engagement's got a ton of baggage these days in terms of what kind of word and the value of that word. But an engaged audience, we can all agree that an engaged audience is better than an unengaged audience. Someone who's interested in the content that we create, the experience that we create, is more valuable to us than not. But ultimately, we need to turn them into what we call an addressable audience, someone that we can actually choose. When we start talking about the idea of social and not being able to get someone's addressable and reach them organically through social media, we need to be able to address them. And the previous speaker, even before that, talked about this idea of the importance of getting an email address and the idea of getting somebody who we can address anytime we want. So a Twitter follower, a website visitor, a podcast listener, a Facebook like, a tweet, those are not addressable audiences. Email address, physical address, phone number, text number, somebody who arrives in an event where I can address you by name. Now, it's up to me to keep you engaged. It's up for me to keep you subscribed. But I get to address you on my terms when I want. You're an addressable audience. That is an asset that can build in value over time. That's the goal of content marketing, is to build an audience. We don't measure the content. We measure the impact we have on an audience. The content is worthless unless it impacts an audience to the point that they want another piece. And how do we know they want another piece from us? They subscribe. They ask for it. That's the value. And so then we can model them against different business goals. And I'll go through some of those business goals that we can actually model them against. But that modeled audience then becomes measured. And if we have the technology in place to be able to measure that modeled audience, we have probably the most valuable asset in our business, a measured, modeled, engaged audience. That's the key. It can be one of the most important, if not valuable, assets in your business. Think about this for a moment. Salesforce and LinkedIn did a study where they discovered that if you're in B2B, the average cost, and this means your cost plus the media cost plus the acquisition cost of the average email address these days is $150. Multiply your email database by 150 each, and you'll figure you're managing one of the most important, if not the most important assets in your business. Now, separate that from people you've scraped and scan their trade show badge to people who actually want to hear from you. That's the difference in value. And how much more valuable is it if they want to hear from you, if they want to get what it is you have to say? That's the true value, to measure that audience. Now, the idea here is okay, we go, okay, I get that. We're going to build an audience, and I sort of understand that. But where are we today? The biggest mistake that we see at Content Marketing Institute is that people, whether you're a business and a marketing team of 1, or whether you're a global business and you're a team of 50 or 100 or 200, don't understand what the model of content is today in their business. I'll give you an example of this. So we have 4 typical business models of content in a business these days. The first is what we call the player model. This is the most common that we find. This is where, and maybe this is you in your organization, the business goes, we should do some content. We're going to do a blog. We're going to do an email newsletter. Let's do some social media. And we're going to hire Bill or Bob or Sue to do that. And Bill and Bob or Sue are excited to do that. And they go, yes, let's do that. And then they go, great, we need more content. We need more content. We need more content. Let's put out some more assets. We're going to create more infographics. We're going to create more white papers. We're going to create some social posts. We're going to create some tweets. We're going to create all these emails. And you're like, yes, yes, yes. And you're an on-demand vending machine of content. And you're just producing content and producing content and producing content. And people go, how is it working? And you're like, I don't know. I'm too busy producing content to figure out how it's going to work. And this is where we call this the player model, where you're supporting the rest of the business internally with internally focused goals, and the only thing you're doing is producing assets. Then we see where most people want to try and move to. This idea of what we call the performer model. The performer model is where we can actually start to make a publication, a thing, an experience that people want to subscribe to. The team reorganizes itself around producing something proactively, not just reactively to the rest of the business asking for more assets, but actually proactively changing their model of saying, this is what we're building over here, and you will find value in it. And then there's the idea of the business strategy where it's also internally focused goals. And this is a perfectly normal strategy, which is we may not produce any content at all, but because we have centralized a process around the service of content, SEO, translation, localization, structure, best practices, we're going to make everybody else in the organization great at content. That's a perfectly viable business strategy, a perfectly viable model, especially in larger organizations. And then finally, we have what we call the platform model. The platform model is where business becomes a business model of itself. Maybe you're familiar with Red Bull. This is the quintessential example of content as a platform. Now, it's a content marketing talk. I'm required by contract to mention Red Bull, so Red Bull, there you go. Red Bull Media House, fantastic organization. What I love about Red Bull's model so much, and the idea of them making money, because they do make money, by the way. They sell syndicated content, they sell advertising in Red Bulletin, they sell all kinds of wonderful things and make money as a business unit. It's a revenue-generating enterprise for Red Bull. But the thing is most impactful is the fact that they've done the research to show that, well, now, first of all, we all have to agree that Red Bull tastes like shit. We're just going to have to all agree on that. And so after we figure that out, that Red Bull actually tastes like crap, well, one of the things we can also know is that Red Bull is the most expensive soft drink in the soft drink aisle. And they've done the research to show that people who don't like Red Bull or who have never tried Red Bull will actually recommend Red Bull to their friends based on the value of the content that they've received. That's powerful. Imagine someone who doesn't like your product or who has tried your product and doesn't like it and recommending that product to their friend because of the value for them. That's a great content platform. Those are the 4 business models. What's the challenge? When we look at it, why can't we understand what it is? It's because right now strategic content is stuck in average. When we look at content as a process, as a function, as a strategy, content marketing is highly stuck in average. When we look at content every single day, we talk to businesses and basically we say, who are you? How are you dealing with content marketing? And they say, well, this is my colleague Bill and I'm Margaret and we're two people in content and we kind of support the entire business. We support sales and marketing and VP and the CEO and his corporate social responsibility videos. We hate those things, but we have to create them anyway and it just all sucks. 56% of us, or excuse me, 51% of us are in this model where we're supporting the entire organization. Then, the interesting thing is it any wonder that we don't have a documented strategy for it? Only 35% have a documented content marketing strategy. This, by the way, the biggest predicator of success. Those who have a documented real strategy for content marketing are succeeding. Those who don't. But how could we have a documented strategy? We're too busy producing all these assets for the rest of the business. Is it any wonder then that only 24% of businesses are actually committed to the practice of content marketing? How can we be committed? It's only Bill and Margaret creating assets for the rest of the business, and there's no documented strategy, so why would we be committed? And then, is it any wonder that only 20% of us can feel like we get any ROI out of it at all? Can't get ROI out of it. We don't have a strategy. How can we know what we're getting an ROI for if we don't have a strategy and if all we're doing is creating assets for the rest of the business and there's no strategy to be documented? So when we look at the flip side and we say, what's a successful content marketer look like? They're building platforms. 90% of them are successful. They're creating audience-centric content first, building a platform that builds audiences. That's what the research shows. So can we make this change? Can we actually make a change? Because right now there is no business model. Thus, we don't know what we're scaling into and have no strategy. Thus, means we're basically creating no measurement at all because we don't really know what the heck we're measuring and we're confused about it. So what do? We default down to the lowest common denominator, which is what? Making the logo pop. And that's what we do. We're good at making the logo pop. We'll make the logo pop all day long. Make the logo in the center bigger. Okay, we'll make it pop. And so, can we switch? Can we evolve into the platform model? Like Arrow Electronics. Arrow Electronics, the largest distributor of electronics parts in the world. They have spent the last 18 months buying every magazine, website, and journal in their space. Why would they do that? Why would they become the biggest media company in the world for electrical engineers? Because they've done the research to show that electrical engineers get 100% of their post-university education from what? Trade journals, websites, emails, newsletters. And so they're going to go out and say, hey, we can make sure that our TAM, our total addressable market, stays viable. We're going to make sure they're educated. And guess what? We get all the data because guess what? We are still selling to our competitors advertising. These are all making money, but they get all of that audience. They have now estimated that they reach 76% of their total addressable market anytime they want. That's a powerful statement. Or the performer model. We often mention John Deere as one of the original birthplaces of content marketing. 130 years they've been producing the #1 farming magazine in the world, the Furrow, print magazine. 4 million subscribers across the globe. We asked them once how many times you've mentioned John Deere in that magazine. They said, in 130 years, probably 4. They've created the #1 farming magazine in the world, which has now, of course, been put out to digital. So they've got now 7 different versions of the Furrow magazine in digital, email, newsletter. And they've got an entire dedicated team just focused on building this for their business. Processor model 3M, what Carlos Abler and his team are doing at 3M, basically not creating a stitch of content. Their whole goal is to walk around to the organization, and they have 56,000 SKUs at 3M, so you can imagine it's quite the daunting task. But to every program manager, every product manager, every function, they go in and teach the best practices in SEO, best practices in content management, best practices, guidelines, playbooks, all of the things that helps 3M be a great content producer without trying to tie it all together because that would just be untenable. And then finally, how do we look at moving? How do we actually look at moving? I love this story so much. It's a great case study of this on Content Marketing Institute's website. This is Symantec. They evolved from a very campaign-based focused into that performer model. What did they do? The woman who runs this program, she came in, she said, all these teams, they're just creating content for sales and creating content over here and cybersecurity this and security that. There was just a bunch of stuff getting created, a bunch of noise. She said, we're going to reorganize that. We're going to reorganize this after they did a content audit. They said, we can build 4 different publications here and cover off 95% of what we need to cover. And we're going to change this to a proactive editorial calendar, a proactive editorial strategy across these 4 platforms, and then we're going to merchandise out all of that content that we're creating for these 4 platforms, and we're going to build 4 audiences on this. And it's proving to be so much more successful for them, both on a cost-benefit basis, in other words, it's cheaper, but 2, they're actually building an audience that drives more value for the business over time. So where are you? You can start to ask yourself in this model. Most of us, quite frankly, are in this what we call the center of confusion. We don't know. We're just doing stuff. We're just keeping up as best we can. And so if we can start to figure out not only where we are, but where can we move? Because we have to evolve and adapt. One of my favorite gurus out there is this guy. He is just Eli Goldratt is just amazing. He wrote a book called The Haystack Syndrome, and if you're into data and geekiness, it's just an amazing book. But the thing I love so much of what he said is he said, tell me how you're going to measure me, and I'll tell you how I'll behave. And if you measure me in an illogical way, don't complain about illogical behavior. And this is so much when I go in and talk to a company about their content marketing strategy, and I say, tell me about your content marketing strategy. And they'll say, well, we produce 12 white papers per year. And I say, why 12? Well, because there's 12 months in a year, silly. We have to produce one a month. I mean, that's just the way it is. Well, how about blog posts? Well, 4 per month. 1 per week. And I'm like, well, what about the months that have 5 weeks? Well, we go dark, but shut up. Don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. This is the way we produce content. It's like a widget in a factory. We have to produce 12. We have to produce 14. We have to produce 17 tweets. We have to produce 14 blog posts. It's Friday. The email newsletter has to go out. Why? Because it's Friday. That's why the email newsletter has to go out. And it's got to have 3 bullet points. It can't have 2 because then it looks like shit. We have to have 3 bullet points for the email newsletter to go out, and we have to get it out because it's Friday. This is the way we operate in content. And instead, can we change and ask ourselves, if we can start to look at it through a different lens, if we can start to change the way we look at content as a product, not a project, not a campaign, developing something that builds an audience. It's not more efficient. Anybody who tells you that content marketing is more efficient, cheaper, or is shorter is fooling you. It's not. It's harder, it's more expensive, and it takes longer. But it can provide exponentially more value if we can do it correctly. Content is harder, it takes longer, it is more expensive than an ad, than a piece of collateral, than a one sheet. You don't believe that? Go talk to an agency. Go ask the agency for an ad. And the agency's going to go, oh, you don't know, we're going to give you the best ad ever. We're going to give you the most amazing ad. We got a guy with a beard out to here, and he wears a tam, and he walks to Starbucks, and he types on a manual typewriter. He's the most hip cat ever. And he's going to give you the best ad. He's going to design the most amazing ad for you. And they're going to give you 3 versions. I don't know why it's always 3, but they're going to give you 3 versions. And the first version is going to be kind of what the brief said, but it's not really going to be what the brief said. And the second version is going to be way out there, the thing that they want to win a Cannes Lion award for, and you're going to hate that because it's just so out there. And then the third version is going to be sort of in between. It's going to be sort of, and you're going to do the thing that they hate. You're going to say, oh, can I have a little bit of number 1, a little bit of number 2 in there, and just sort of make a fourth, and they're going to talk bad behind your back. Just know they're going to talk bad behind your back. They're going to hate you, but they're going to do it. They're going to give you a 4th version. You're going to go, yes, that's fantastic. They're going to send you a bill. Now go ask them for a piece of content. And first of all, they're going to go, what? And then the second thing they're going to say is, well, how good do you want it? Because if you want like a good piece of content with like subject matter experts and all that, it's going to be expensive. But if you want like the top 10 reasons you need aluminum siding on your house, well, then we've got a freelancer who works at 10 cents a word, and we'll just get it settled for you. Content is harder. It takes longer. Delivering value through content is harder. Now, you've seen a lot of the different buyer's journeys throughout the different presentations. This is mine. I use the infinity loop buyer's journey, one, because it fits on a 16:9 slide. It's really great. But the second reason is because I think it really represents what we're talking about today when we talk about the true recurring buyer's journey. Where, yes, we go through discover, learn, try. There's a transaction. Then we use the product, adopt the product, and then ultimately return back for more. And the reason I call it transaction is because, for our nonprofit friends and NGO friends, it's not always about buying something. It can be donation. It can be volunteering. It can be something. But the journey itself of engagement generally looks like this, where that transaction, there's a commitment involved. And then once we commit, we basically integrate it in to return back. So we can ask ourselves, what focus, purpose, experience do we want to create? Because when we mostly create experiences, we mostly create it across the entirety of the buyer's journey, and we think, it's going to be good for everything. But it's not. We need to focus and make it specific. So can we create a discover experience like Johnson & Johnson did? Maybe you knew that Johnson & Johnson owns babycenter.com. Maybe you don't know, but they do. You won't find Johnson & Johnson's logo there. You won't find any of their products there. That's not about that. It's about engaging 40 million moms and dads, and that's what they reach, 40 million moms and dads every single month. And why would they do that? They do that because that 40 million moms and dads tells them everything they need to know about discovering the insights into what that customer values. That 40 million moms and dads, they know for a fact what their ad headline that they want, whether it's sleep through the night, sleep overnight, or sleep tonight, is going to resonate most with moms in Georgia. Sleep just generally for parents overall, but sleep through the night, by the way, is the winner there. And they know that before they go spend hundreds of millions of dollars on a TV campaign, they know what ad headline they're going to run because they're A/B testing that. They know for a fact that moms plan their baby's first birthday at 10 months. That's invaluable information for a brand manager. That's the value that that audience provides to them, is a discovery in terms of what their customer cares about so that they can introduce better marketing into it. How about a learn experience, establishing the trust? I told you about the Red Bull example. They understand through that recommendation engine that it's about reaching the influencers to making decisions before. They're teaching their customers how to be customers. That's the coolness of the Red Bull program. It's not that they're creating awesome, cool, branded content and throwing guys out of spaceships and doing motocross events. It's that they're having people recommend their product before they've even tried the product. That's an amazing idea of the top of the funnel and establishing the trust by delivery of valuable content. Or how about a try experience? This is Indium. This is where I get to out-boring you. You cannot tell me you have a boring product or a boring company. They make soldering equipment. Soldering equipment where you literally metal and put it all together, and that's soldering. They have 24 different blogs for soldering. They're not a big company. They're a small company. Yeah, that's right. They have 24 different blogs, one for each individual flavor of solder. Engineers front this, and then they have writers and a whole team that actually produces these blogs, and they're amazing. They are, if you said, who's the biggest media company in soldering, I would tell you it's not a media company. It's Indium. And they have 24 different blogs, and they're translating those blogs into 6 different languages. It's huge for them. And they're driving, 600% year over year more leads with these blogs because they're doing what? Creating trust with engineers. And if any of you target engineers as part of your target personas, you know what a hard thing that is to do because engineers do not trust marketing at all. Or how about an Evolve experience? This is Think Money Magazine from TD Ameritrade, financial services company, both institutional and retail. And what did they discover? They discovered that when you sign up for the TD Ameritrade trading platform to go trade stocks, your average trading velocity is 1 time per week. What they do is they start sending you this print magazine. Guess what? Your trading velocity goes up to 5 times per week. What are they doing? They're teaching you how to be a better customer by teaching you how to be a savvier, smarter, more experienced trader. And guess what? They make money every time. Their VP of marketing has said this is the best marketing investment we ever made. Creating trust and evolving that trust so that we're teaching our customers how to be better customers. We're educating them. Return experience, maybe my favorite example of content marketing of the last 20 years. The largest software technology event on the planet is not held by a media company. It's held by a software company, and that's Salesforce. The Dreamforce, 175,000 people pay for the privilege of going to Dreamforce every year. They have developed that level of trust with those people who are going to go have an experience and celebrate everything around Salesforce. And guess who gets all the data? Guess who gets all of that first-party stuff? Guess who gets the brand recognition? Guess all of that is Salesforce. It's a power. They've estimated alone that if Salesforce were to just peel out Dreamforce, it would itself be worth $1 billion. So get to a purpose. Figure out your content. Stop producing assets and start producing a production, a center of gravity, a resource center, a content hub, whatever you want to call it, and figure out where along the buyer's journey it's going to sit. Is it going to be a subscribe experience, top of the funnel, discovering, developing trust with an audience that doesn't know you very well? Is it going to be a win experience, one that's meant to evolve the trust to the point where they commit and understand that you are the best product or solution for their particular need? Or is it a grow experience where we basically deepen the trust with existing customers and develop loyalty, upsell, cross-sell, etc.? Which of those 3? Pick one for your next experience, for your website, for your blog, for your resource center, for your content hub. The biggest mistake I see content marketers make is they try and do all of that. They launch a blog and they go, hey, it's going to be everything. It's going to develop a brand, and it's going to develop leads, and it's going to develop loyalty. It's going to be a floor wax, a dessert topping. It's going to do all of it. And so we can't do all of it. We have to focus. And so we can invest in that audience as an asset. And so I'm going to give you the sort of idea of how do we measure this audience as an asset over time. And it goes to 5 different ideas. And if you haven't figured it out by now, I'm a big fan of alliteration. So it's my 5 C's of how do we actually start to invest in an audience and see the categories of how do we measure this? Once we build this business model, and once we focus on building a production, and once we focus then on the audience as an asset, how do we measure that? What does content marketing look like when it's measured well? So the first category is contribution. If you're stuck in that player model where you're just producing assets, fantastic. I'm sorry for you, but you can make that work. If your goals as a business with content marketing are very small, very limited, very focused, and just using content to support marketing campaigns, in other words, I'm just creating assets to support a demand generation campaign, or I'm supporting this, using this white paper as Google bait fodder, whatever it is, fine. But measure it only that way, as contribution. That's what it's good for. In other words, put a strategy together, put the content strategy together, but measure it based on the contribution to the business. Great example of this is a CFO will come up to me and they'll go, "Hi, Robert, yeah, I get the whole content marketing thing, blah, blah, blah. We're not building a blog." And I'm like, "Well, don't build a blog. Don't build I'm sad, but don't. Instead, are you creating more content or less content?" Yes, we're creating more content every single day. 200% more if you believe Forrester. 200% more content. Is that a cost? It's absolutely a cost. Great. Then doesn't it make sense to put a strategy together, put a process together, and put a team together if the only benefit is only to get your arms around what it is you're already spending? And the CFO will say, "Yeah, great. Now we agree that creating a content marketing strategy that measures itself on contributions is important. Now the only thing we disagree on is how much more valuable it can be if you could start to build an audience." So do that first. If even the only access to it is understanding what we're spending on content. Great example that I talked with a small business. They had 4 different agencies they were getting content from. They were getting all sales had an agency engaged. Demand gen had an agency engaged. The PR people had an agency engaged. All of them were creating content willy-nilly all over the place. All they did was sort of centralize that and make a central strategy out of it. And they said, if we just get smart about the way that we create and produce content, we can basically reduce this agency load down to 1. And we can get about a 30% reduction in cost of content we're already creating. That can be just as beneficial as even starting at all. Great example of this is SecureWorks. They're a cybersecurity company focusing on security, creating content for assets. And what they wanted to do was they created, all these assets that lived out on the website that you could go register for and download, but they didn't look at it from building an audience perspective, at least not yet. They're now evolving into that. The main job of this content was just to understand through the consumption of content what the buyer's behavior was for 3 different personas. 1, the executives, who were interested in very high-level security efforts. 2, the journalists and consumers who were only interested in it from the, what's the danger to my PC or what's the danger to the public. And 3, the engineers who wanted to get super geeky about it. And they wanted to understand what was their journey through the site, what content, what issues were important to them, to get that data to be able to much more have a much better rationale for explaining that in the sales process. And they were really successful with it. They doubled their rate on conversions and visitors by using that data to ultimately optimize the website to be better for each of those personas and double their conversions. The second thing, campaign value, the leads. Better leads, more leads, faster leads, the Glengarry leads, if you want, through the idea of content. The idea with all of these, by the way, is that they build upon each other. How do they build upon each other to provide multiple ways of getting at value? So can we get better leads? Can we get stronger leads? Can we actually create better campaigns using content marketing? So things like ad conversion rates. One of my favorite examples of the way to do this. As was said before, it's getting exceedingly difficult to get data. In the world of GDPR and privacy and all the things that we're going to have to deal with from the California privacy laws, getting data from our customers is going to be more difficult, not less. But if they want to subscribe to us, we treat them like customers and they ask for content, giving us their data, that's a transaction. It's a perfectly legitimate reason to have that first-party data. Using that data to do then lookalike advertising on LinkedIn or Facebook or other ideas, that first-party data that you own is giving a better ad conversion rate. This is the wonderful example of Kraft. Have you seen Kraft and their online food recipes? They have 3.5 million opt-in subscribers to their online recipes database. They live in the media department, and they take all that first-party data when you subscribe, given 2 pieces of information, your email address and your zip code. What do you get with that? As you start surfing around, because you've been surfing apple crumble and apple pie and desserts and all of that, guess what kind of ads you're going to start to see on Google and YouTube and Facebook? You're going to start to see, hey, there's a wonderful recipe here and Kraft product that I could actually go buy. Oh, and guess what? There's a coupon code for my local grocery store. Because they're personalizing and building that ad dynamically based on the fact that you consume that content and are opting into that idea. Better SEO, organic traffic, better ideas of campaign and information for your sales guys who can actually address more readily the interests that a salesperson or a customer might have. Great example of this is Monster, what Monster is doing. I love this program so much. What Monster is doing is, of course, they're a job board, a job site. They launched their Career Advice Center, and it was just an amazing, wonderful thing. They do videos, they do blog posts, they do infographics. They've got they're building an audience with this Career Advice Center. They, have started to build upon all of these values so far. So from a contribution thing, yeah, they're giving that content, the original research, they give it over to the PR department, and they're giving that to Facebook, and they're getting earned media on it's not Facebook, Fast Company. And Fast Company's writing articles for them. So they're contributing to PR's efforts by creating amazing content. 20% of all their organic content comes through this idea, this platform now. So they've completely optimized, because of course, this is better SEO optimized than their main corporate website. This is because they're answering every question that a customer might want to have. 20% of all of their organic traffic now comes from this program. The more interesting thing is that the organic traffic that's coming from there converts at an extremely high rate. 4 million job searches, which is of course how they get paid. 48,000 new members, which they've estimated if they had to go out and buy the media to get those 48,000 new members, they would have had to have spent $3 million in paid advertising to get. It's starting to build upon itself. This audience now builds upon itself because guess what? That's the audience that keeps on giving. Those 48,000 members, this year they're not going to find a job, but next year they might need to find a job, and so on and so forth. As the audience gets bigger, so does the ability to meet more and more goals. Did they spend $3 million to build this thing? They did not. They did not spend anywhere near that. It is running itself as a profit for them. Competency value, becoming more competent, a smarter organization because of the content platform and the audience that you're building. A better, smarter, faster organization. This is a fantastic, the Johnson & Johnson, as I mentioned earlier, is a fantastic example of this because they are building upon all of these things. As I mentioned, they're doing ad testing of headlines, they're doing ad testing of copy, they're doing research. The audience is now also being assembled into product research panels, so they're pulling some of their super fans into these in-person panels to get better ideas of what they should do from a product research perspective. So these super fans can actually tell them what kind of products we would buy, what kind of products we don't like, what are the features, the benefits that we should be doing. So instead of spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to a research firm, they have the biggest and best research panel that they could ever put together through their impassioned audience who love exactly what they're doing. The testing, of course, and then they're using the data, most importantly, to understand the differences in global audiences. What do moms in Spain think versus moms in China versus moms in US, moms in Brazil? Because they are different. The cultures are different. The values are different. The ad headlines that will work are different. And they have the ability to make themselves a much smarter and much more efficient marketing engine by using BabyCenter to do that. Customer value, teaching customers to be better customers. The more valuable a customer, the better the customer. Brand loyalty was mentioned before. Love that idea. Creating better experiences creates better brand loyalty because why? You're creating that trust. You're creating trust, and so thus the experience is what we trust. Thus, the trust in the brand is better. Better word of mouth. Telling customer stories so that you have your customers telling your story across all those social media channels. I just saw a wild statistic that young people, I don't actually use the M word, the young people today actually trust online reviews like Yelp more than they trust their brother-in-law or sister-in-law. That's an amazing statistic to me. Think about that for a minute. It's your brother-in-law on the phone. No, give me a Yelp review. I'd rather trust that. Yeah, that's what I like. It's a fascinating statistic. But the customer value, creating customer value, to be able to teach customers to be better customers. This example is a fun one. The TD Ameritrade example that I mentioned before with the print magazine, of course they're creating much more customers who transact at a much higher rate. But the interesting thing to me is how they've built upon that. They take all the high-performing content out of Think Money magazine, and they moved it now and repurpose it, and they move it to a top-of-the-funnel experience called the Ticker Tape blog. And the Ticker Tape blog is driving subscribers. So they're just taking the exact same content, repurposing it slightly to remove some of the acronyms and remove some of the knowledge that you would have to know as a TD Ameritrade customer, repositioning it slightly and teaching customers how to be customers. So they're using that content simultaneously at both ends of the customer experience to drive a better customer experience. That's how we start to use and create content as a business strategy. They're actually creating fantastic SEO now for what they're trying to do, driving higher traffic. Content from the data and the content consumption, for giving them insight into what's going on in marketing and sales, making salespeople smarter, making the personalization of the site smarter because it's looking at contextually what it is you consume and what you're interested in. Are you interested in being a day trader? Are you interested in being a long-term value trader? They can start to understand that and give you attributes as you start to do that. And then finally, cash. You can actually generate revenue, whether that's cost savings or direct revenue from your content. You absolutely have the power to be able to do that. You can offset costs in marketing. There are revenue opportunities, and it's not just limited to those Dreamforce kinds of programs or big companies. Small companies are doing this as well. And in fact, one of my favorite examples of content marketing over the last year or so is a very small startup company called Terminus. Terminus is a small software company, and they do account-based marketing software. And when they started, they were basically a handful of guys, and they got a little bit of venture money, and they were just trying to figure out guerrilla ways to do marketing because they were trying to figure it out. So what did they do? They launched a content brand called Flip My Funnel. And the Flip My Funnel brand was launched first as a blog, and then second as a podcast, and then the third thing they did, and this is the most genius thing they did, they started an event called the Flip My Funnel event. First year that they actually launched that event, they had 600 people attend that event, customers and prospects attended that wonderful event. And by the way, they got 100 new customers in the couple of years that they've had that event since. So it becomes a top of the funnel experience for them, creating this wonderful event. By the way, it's an event that's paying for itself because sponsors, some of their competitors, by the way, that they invite to this event, will pay for the privilege of sponsoring and being a booth at this particular Flip My Funnel event. They've now also converted all this wonderful thing into the idea of the event paying for itself with $1.5 million as cost that they didn't have to spend for their marketing of gathering these new customers. It's become such a big, wonderful thing for them. They've now split it off because they have investors coming to them saying, we'd like to buy just the Flip My Funnel event. And so they've got investors wanting to invest just in that. So they've now split it into two. They've got the Flip My Funnel part of Terminus, and they have the software, account-based marketing software. You too can do this. It is not relegated to big businesses. We can create the experiences, the innovative, storytelling, wonderful experiences because it comes down to developing this, which is trust. As I mentioned, I love the fact that this afternoon session has been focusing on truth and trust and this idea because this is where we have to get to. This is our brass ring these days as marketers. Because guess what? These two things we have conflated for way too long. May I have your attention and do I have your trust? Of course they love our website. Time on site is way up. Time on our website is it's not that they can't find what they're looking for, it's that they love our content. They absolutely do. You give me Google Analytics, I'll make it say anything you'd like me to say. And this is what we do. We say, can I have your attention? And we transfer that and we say, we have trust. And it's not true. It's not true. Attention and trust are two different things. And in fact, when we have high trust, attention goes down. The amount of attention needed to be spent on something where we have a high trust relationship goes down. Think about it for a moment, that when you're sitting in the restaurant and your best friend comes walking in and goes, don't say a word, you've got to see this movie. You're seeing the movie. It doesn't matter what comes out of her mouth next. You are seeing that movie. When the babysitter shows up, and sporting like a big, metal thing coming out of their ear and a big thing coming out of their nose, and they got tattoos, and they smell a little like weed, and they smell a little like a lot of things. I mean, maybe for some of you, you're like, yeah, baby, come on, let's go. But for most of us, the choice between that and the amount of instruction we're going to give that babysitter, if we're going to let that babysitter stay, versus when our grandma shows up, and she's like, where do I go? And it's like, I don't know, you figure it out. We're out the door. The level of trust that we have is in direct inverse proportion to the amount of attention that has to be paid. That's a key thing. The wonderful, wonderful book about this by Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, called The Speed of Trust, if you want to look it up, which he talks about there's nothing faster than trust. Nothing expedites a relationship faster than developing trust. That's the key. The problem with funnel-based advertising right now, the funnel-based marketing, is that it puts the levels of trust in exactly the wrong order. So perhaps you're familiar with the moments of truth. Google made famous the 0 moment of truth. Procter & Gamble in the early 60s and 70s had the first and second moment of truth. And so what we have when we have the moments of truth in this funnel-based process is we have Google's zero moment of truth, which becomes before the first and second, hence its name. And it basically says, if you're going to search for something, you're going to click on something and make that's that zero moment of truth. When I make a decision about clicking on something. And the message there that we're clicking on is, trust us, you'll like us. Trust us in this ad, you're going to like, trust me, you're going to like this. You're going to like this. I don't know who you are yet, but trust me, you're going to like it. That's the idea of the zero moment of truth. Trust us, you're going to like us. Then there comes Procter & Gamble's first moment of truth. And the first moment of truth comes when you actually make a decision about the product. You make a decision based on the product, and you say, I'm going to commit to this. And that's the first moment of truth. And that message is, trust us, others like you trust us. Your family does, the Yelp review does, the recommendation does, the testimonial does. You can see yourself in that car. You can see yourself because others like you have done the exact same thing. And then finally, the customer service, the second moment of truth, is when you decide to actually integrate this and make it part of your life after you've bought the product, which is, trust us, we're here for you. Trust us, we're here for you in that customer service. That's where the trust is built on the service. The idea of content basically reverses that and creates the most important one, which is that second one, right up top. It basically starts with developing trust us, we're here for you. Delivery of value first. Delivery of value through content, the experience first. Trust us, we're here for you. Because guess what? It's a multiplier. It's an enhancement. It makes all the others so much easier. Trust us, we're here for you. Delivery of value. Trust us, others like you trust us. Well, of course, because I can move through that much faster now. Trust us, you'll like us when you get to the product and service. Yes, of course. That's the magic of content and development of experiences. And here's the thing. As was mentioned in the previous presentation, which is just so wonderful, we are at a low point. So Edelman, of course, does its trust barometer, and where we're at about 48% right now. And you can see trust in the mainstream media, according to Pew, when we look at the mainstream media, is hovering right around the 37 to 42%. It's weird for some young people, I know. When I tell young people when I'm in workshops and stuff that in 1973, 1974, 1975, when even post-Watergate, when Walter Cronkite said something, it was true. There was no debate. When the evening news said something, when the Washington Post said something, it was undisputed. It was the truth. When institutions said something, it was the truth. We believed it. 80% of us was where trust hovered. And it has been slowly going down. Why? Because the democratization of content, the ability for channels to fragment, the tribalization of media, we are right back where Benjamin Day was in the 1830s. The tribalization of media has created trust, and that's what you can actually see the uptick in over the last couple of years. As trust reached its lowest point, and the tribalization, now we have found our trusted sources of news, of information, and we wrapped around them. And so here's the thing, the bar is really low right now. We can become the trusted source of interesting things for our customers. Whether you're marketing locally, whether you're marketing nationally, or whether you're marketing globally, the opportunity is high right now because the bar is low in terms of how we can actually become more trusted than the news, more trusted than our institutions, more trusted than the government. We can get there. In fact, one of the things that the Edelman study found in the last barometer of truth was the fact that we trust actually experts and CEOs of companies more than we do some of our government institutions and religious institutions. This is our opportunity. We can become the trusted source of interesting things. We can actually do this because guess what today, folks? Facts, delivery of facts and figures are commodities. It's not good enough anymore. It is not good enough for your sales guys to reduce it down to features and benefits and the facts of your products. It's just not good enough. You will not compete in the noise, the lies, the fake news, you can't compete. You simply can't. No matter how accurate they are, you can't compete. You must make people care. You must create powerful, trustworthy experiences that make people care about what it is you have to say. Otherwise, you can't compete. Because we are right here in 1831 with Benjamin Day. And you can't compete with facts and figures against the guy who comes out and sells Chuck E. Cheese tokens as Bitcoin. You can't compete with that. You can't compete with the guy who tweets out a picture of a shark swimming down a freeway saying, hey, here's a picture of a shark after a hurricane swimming down a freeway. You can't compete with that with facts and figures. You can't compete with the guy who wins the lottery for $200,000 and then puts a bunch of manure in his boss's front yard. You can't compete with that. You can't compete with the music journalist who says that Maroon 5 is the number one band of the 21st century. I'm sorry, you can't compete with that. Now, here's the thing. Only one of these is actually true. Only one. Which one is true? Tell me which one it is. The Bitcoin one? The lottery guy. Anybody else? I'm sorry to tell you, if I haven't depressed you enough about truth and trust, I'm sorry to say that Maroon 5 is actually the number one band of the 21st century. Nickelback, you guys, is number 2. So take that with you in the days going forward. If you didn't believe that it was already bad, Nickelback is the number 2 band of the 21st century. The opportunity is here. We can change things. We can build these interesting, trusted things. Trust and development of content experiences are the way that we will actually succeed in the marketing and advertising of the future. If you're interested in any of this, this is a book I'm giving away for free. Reinventcontentmarketing.com. You can get the book for free. It's a full-on book. It's the Kindle version, but it's just in PDF form, so it can go into any e-reader you have. Happy to give that away for you if you want it. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you had a great time at this conference, and thanks a lot.
Robert Rose.